And Alyattes, when this answer was reported to him, sent a herald forthwith to Miletos, desiring to make a truce with Thrasybulus and the Milesians for so long a time as he should be building the temple. He then was being sent as envoy to Miletos, and Thrasybulus in the meantime being informed beforehand of the whole matter, and knowing what Alyattes was meaning to do, contrived this device. He gathered together in the marketplace all the store of provisions which was found in the city, both his own and that which belonged to private persons. And he proclaimed to the Milesians that on a signal given by him, they should all begin to drink and make merry with one another. This Thrasybulus did, and thus proclaimed to the end that the herald from Sardis, seeing a vast quantity of provisions carelessly piled up and the people feasting, might report this to Alyattes, and so on fact it happened. For when the herald returned to Sardis after seeing this and delivering to Thrasybulus the charge which was given to him by the king of Lydia, the peace which was made came about as I am informed, merely because of this. For Alyattes, who thought that there was a great famine in Miletos, and that the people had been worn down by the extreme of misery, heard from the herald, when he returned from Miletos, the opposite to that which he himself supposed. And after this the peace was made between them on condition of being guest friends and allies to one another. And Alyattes built 2 temples to Athene at Assesos in place of one, and himself recovered from his sickness. With regard, then, to the war waged by Alyattes with the Milesians and Thrasybulus, things went thus. As for Periander, the man who gave information about the oracle to Thrasybulus, he was the son of Kypselos and despot of Corinth. In his life say the Corinthians, and with them agree the Lesbians. There happened to him a very great marvel, namely that Arion of Methymna was carried ashore at Tynaran upon a dolphin's back. This man was a harper, second to none of those who then lived, and the first, so far as we know, who composed a dithyramb, naming it so and teaching it to a chorus at Corinth. This Arion, they say, who for the most part of this time stayed with Periander, conceived a desire to sail to Italy and Sicily, and after he had there acquired large sums of money, he wished to return again to Corinth. He set forth, therefore, from Taros, and as he had faith in Corinthians more than in other men, he hired a ship with a crew of Corinthians. These, the story says, when out in open sea, formed a plot to cast Arion overboard and so possess his wealth. And he, having obtained knowledge of this, made entreaties to them, offering them his wealth and asking them to grant him his life. With this, however, he did not prevail upon them, but the men who were conveying him bade him either slay himself there, that he might receive burial on the land, or leap straightway into the sea. So Arion, being driven to a strait, entreated them that, since they were so minded, they would allow him to take his stand in full minstrel's garb upon the deck of the ship and sing. And he promised to put himself to death after he had sung. They then, well pleased to think that they should hear the best of all minstrels upon earth, drew back from the stern towards the middle of the ship, and he put on the full minstrel's garb and took his lyre, and standing on the deck performed the Orthian measure. Then as the measure ended, he threw himself into the sea just as he was, in his full minstrel's garb, and they went on sailing away to Corinth. But him, they say, a dolphin supported on its back, and brought him to shore at Tynaron, and when he had come to land, he proceeded to Corinth with his minstrel's garb. Thither having arrived, he related all that had been done. And Periander, doubting of his story, kept Arion in guard and would let him go nowhere, while he kept careful watch for those who had conveyed him. When these came, he called them and inquired of them if they had any report to make of Arion. And when they said that he was safe in Italy, and that they had left him at Taros faring well, Arion suddenly appeared before them in the same guise as when he had made his leap from the ship. And they, being struck with amazement, were no longer able to deny when they were questioned. This is the tale told by the Corinthians and Lesbians alike, and there is at Tynaron a voting offering of Arion of no great size, namely a bronze figure of a man upon a dolphin's back. Alyattes, the Lydian, when he had thus waged war against the Milesians, afterwards died, having reigned 57 years. This king, when he recovered from his sickness, dedicated a votive offering at Delphi, being the second of his house who had so done, namely a great mixing bowl of silver with a stand for it of iron welded together, which last is a sight worth seeing above all the offerings at Delphi, and the work of Glaucus the Chian, who of all men first found out the art of welding iron. After Alyattes was dead, Croesus, the son of Alyattes, received the kingdom in succession, being 35 years of age. He, as I said, fought against the Hellenes, and of them he attacked the Ephesians first. The Ephesians then, being besieged by him, dedicated their city to Artemis, and tied a rope from the temple to the wall of the city. Now the distance between the ancient city, which was then being besieged, and the temple is 7 furlongs. These, I say, were the first upon whom Croesus laid hands, but afterwards he did the same to the other Ionian and Aeolian cities one by one, alleging against them various causes of complaint, and making serious charges against those in whose cases he could find serious grounds, while against others of them he charged merely trifling offenses. Then when the Hellenes in Asia had been conquered and forced to pay tribute, he designed next to build for himself ships and to lay hands upon those who dwelt in the islands. And when all was prepared for his building of ships, they say that Bias of Priene, or according to another account, Pittacus of Mytilene, came to Sardis, and being asked by Croesus whether there was anything doing in Hellas, brought to an end his building of ships by this, saying, O king, said he, the men of the islands are hiring a troop of 10,000 horse, and with this they mean to march to Sardis and fight against thee. And Croesus, supposing that what he reported was true, said, May the gods put it into the minds of the dwellers of the islands to come with horses against the sons of the Lydians. And he answered and said, O king, I perceive that thou dost earnestly desire to catch the men of the islands on the mainland, riding upon horses, and it is not unreasonable that thou shouldest wish for this. What else, however, thinkest thou the men of the islands desire, and have been praying for ever since the time they heard that thou wert about to build ships against them, than that they might catch the Lydians upon the sea, so as to take vengeance upon thee for the Hellenes, who dwell upon the mainland, whom thou dost hold enslaved? Croesus, they say, was greatly pleased with this conclusion, and obeying his suggestion, for he judged him to speak suitably, he stopped his building of ships, and upon that he formed a friendship with the Ionians, dwelling in the islands. As time went on, when nearly all those dwelling on this side of the river Halys had been subdued, for except the Cilicians and Lycians, Croesus subdued and kept under his rule all the nations. That is to say, Lydians, Phrygians, Mysians, Mariandyni, Calibians, Paphlagonians, Thracians, both Thynian and Bithynian, Carians, Ionians, Dorians, Aeolians, and Pamphylians, when these, I say, had been subdued, and while he was still adding to his Lydian dominions, there came to Sardis, then at the height of its wealth, all the wise men of the Hellas, who chanced to be alive at that time, brought thither severally by various occasions, and of them one was Solon the Athenian, who, after he had made laws for the Athenians at their bidding, left his native country for 10 years, and sailed away, saying that he desired to visit various lands, in order that he might not be compelled to repel any of the laws which he had proposed. For of themselves the Athenians were not competent to do this, having bound themselves by solemn oaths to submit for 10 years to the laws, which Solon should propose for them. So, Solon, having left his native country for this reason and for the sake of seeing various lands, came to Amasis in Egypt, and also to Croesus at Sardis. Having there arrived, he was entertained as a guest by Croesus in the king's palace, and afterwards on the 3rd or 4th day, at the bidding of Croesus, his servants led Solon round to see his treasuries. And they showed him all things, how great and magnificent they were. And after he had looked upon them all and examined them as he had occasion, Croesus asked him as follows: Athenian guest, Much report of thee has come to us, both in regard to thy wisdom and thy wanderings, how that in thy search for wisdom thou hast traversed many lands to see them. Now therefore a desire has come upon me to ask thee whether thou hast seen any whom thou deemest to be of all men the most happy. This he asked, supposing that he himself was the happiest of men. But Solon, using no flattery but the truth, only said, Yes, O King Telos the Athenian. And Croesus, marveling at that which he said, asked him earnestly, In what respect dost thou judge Telos to be the most happy? And he said, Telos, in the first place, living while his native state was prosperous, had sons fair and good, and saw from all of them children begotten, and living to grow up. And secondly, he had what with us is accounted wealth, and after his life a most glorious end. For when a battle was fought by the Athenians at Eleusis against the neighboring people, he brought up supports and routed the foe, and there died by a most fair death. And the Athenians buried him publicly where he fell, and honored him greatly. So when Solon had moved Croesus to inquire further by the story of Telos, recounting how many points of happiness he had, the king asked again whom he had seen proper to be placed next after this man, supposing that he himself would certainly obtain at least the second place. But he replied, Cleobes and Baton, for these who were of Argos by race possessed a sufficiency of wealth, and, in addition to this, strength of body such as I shall tell. Both equally had won prizes in the games, and moreover, the following tale is told of them. There was a feast of Hera among the Argives, and it was by all means necessary that their mother should be borne in a cart to the temple. But since their oxen were not brought up in time from the field, the young men, barred from all else by lack of time, submitted themselves to the yoke and drew the wain, their mother being borne by them upon it. And so they brought it on for 45 furlongs, and came to the temple. Then after they had done this, and had been seen by the assembled crowd, there came to their life a most excellent ending. And in this the deity declared that it was better for a man to die than to continue to live. For the Argive men were standing round and extolling the strength of the young men, while the Argive women were extolling the mother, to whose lot it had fallen to have such sons. And the mother being exceedingly rejoiced, both by the deed itself and by the report made of it, took her stand in front of the image of the goddess, and prayed that she would give to Cleobes and Baton her sons, who had honored her greatly, that gift which is best for man to receive. And after this prayer, when they had sacrificed and feasted, the young men lay down to sleep within the temple itself, and never rose again, but were held bound in this last end. And the Argives made statues in the likeness of them, and dedicated them as offerings at Delphi, thinking that they had proved themselves most excellent. Thus, Solon assigned the second place in respect of happiness to these. And Croesus was moved to anger and said, Athenian guest, hast thou then so cast aside our prosperous state as worth nothing, that thou dost prefer to us even men of private station? And he said, Croesus, thou art inquiring about human fortunes of one who well knows that the deity is altogether envious and apt to disturb our lot? For in the course of long time a man may see many things which he would not desire to see, and suffer also many things which he would not desire to suffer. The limit of life for a man I lay down at 70 years, and these 70 years give 25,200 days, not reckoning for any intercalated month. Then if every other one of these years shall be made longer by 1 month, that the seasons may be caused to come round at the due time of the year, the intercalated months will be in number 35 besides the 70 years. And of these months, the days will be 1,050, of all these days being in number 26,250, which go to the 70 years. One day produces nothing at all, which resembles what another brings with it. Thus then, O Croesus, man is altogether a creature of accident. As for thee, I perceive that thou art both great in wealth and king of many men. But that of which thou didst ask me, I cannot call thee yet, until I learn that thou hast brought thy life to a fair ending. For the very rich man is not at all to be accounted more happy than he who has but his subsistence from day to day, unless also the fortune go with him of ending his life well in possession of all things fair. For many very wealthy men are not happy, while many who have but a moderate living are fortunate. And in truth, the very rich man who is not happy has two advantages, only as compared with the poor man who is fortunate. Whereas this latter has many as compared with the rich man who is not happy. The rich man is able better to fulfill his desire, and also to endure a great calamity if it fall upon him, whereas the other has advantage over him in these things which follow. He is not indeed able equally with the rich man to endure a calamity or to fulfill his desire, but these his good fortune keeps away from him, while he is sound of limb, free from disease, untouched by suffering, the father of fair children, and himself of comely form. And if in addition to this he shall end his life well, he is worthy to be called that which thou seekest, namely a happy man. But before he comes to his end, and it is well to hold back and not call him yet happy, but only fortunate. Now to possess all these things together is impossible for one who is mere man, just as no single land suffices to supply all things for itself, but one thing it has and another it lacks. And the land that has the greatest number of things is the best. So also in the case of a man, no single person is complete in himself, for one thing he has and another he lacks. But whosoever of men continues to the end in possession of the greatest number of these things, and then has a gracious ending of his life, he is by me accounted worthy, O king, to receive this name. But we must of everything examine the end, and how it will turn out at the last. For too many God shows but a glimpse of happiness, and then plucks them up by the roots and overturns them. Thus saying, he refused to gratify Croesus, who sent him away from his presence, holding him to no esteem, and thinking him utterly senseless, in that he passed over present good things, and bade men look to the end of every matter. After Solon had departed, a great retribution from God came upon Croesus, probably because he judged himself to be the happiest of all men. First there came and stood by him a dream, which showed to him the truth of the evils that were about to come to pass in respect of his son. Now, Croesus had two sons, of whom one was deficient, seeing that he was deaf and dumb, while the other far surpassed his companions, of the same age in all things, and the name of this last was Atys. As regards this, Atys then the dream signified to Croesus that he should lose him by the blow of an iron spear point. And when he rose up from sleep and considered the matter with himself, he was struck with fear on account of the dream. And first he took for his son a wife, and whereas his son had been wont to lead the armies of the Lydians, he now no longer sent him forth anywhere on any such business, and the javelins and lances and all such things which men use for fighting he conveyed out of the men's apartments, and piled them up in the inner bedchambers, for fear lest something happen, hanging up, might fall down upon his son. Then, while he was engaged about the marriage of his son, there came to Sardes a man under a misfortune, and with hands not clean, a Phrygian by birth, and of the royal house. This man came to the house of Croesus, and according to the customs which prevail in the land, made request that he might have cleansing, and Croesus gave him cleansing. Now the manner of cleansing among the Lydians is the same almost that which the Hellenes use. So when Croesus had done that which was customary, he asked of him whence he came, and who he was, saying as follows: Man, who art thou? And from what region of Phrygia didst thou come to sit upon my hearth? And whom of men or women didst thou slay? And he replied, O king, I am the son of Gordius, the son of Midas, and I am called Adrastos, and I slew my own brother against my will. And therefore I am here, having been driven forth by my father and deprived of all that I had. And Croesus answered this: Thou art, as it chances, the offshoot of men who are our friends, and thou hast come to friends, among whom thou shalt want of nothing so long as thou shalt remain in our land, and thou wilt find it most for thy profit to bear this misfortune as lightly as may be. So he had his abode with Croesus.